He got to know the disease when the flies bite him, and he started seeing worms moving in the eyes. Eventually, he became blind. He cannot see now completely.
River blindness is a terrible disease. I have personally seen so many people suffering from it.
River blindness is one of the major causes of blindness in the world.
The disease itself is a really insidious disease, basically disabling people right when they should be entering the most productive periods of their lives.
He's just only wishing if he could get cure and goes back to a normal life as he was. That is his wish only.
And you get a tremendous amount of itching.
Think about if their body was burning from 1,000 mosquito bites day and night.
The little flies that transmit the disease can only breed in rapidly flowing streams.
Painful. Now imagine if you have 1,000 feasting on you. Wow.
Is that the rain? Wouldn't be a rainforest if it didn't rain.
In Uganda, the idea is to completely get rid of the parasite and therefore be through with the problem.
You can just see the logistical challenges, so you can imagine the kind of time and dedication it takes.
The crabs are heavily infested with larvae. We need to dose the river. We need to use an insecticide.
When you remove the nodule, you are curing the patient. The problem that you get into is that many of the nodules are too far beneath the skin to find.
Others will say, oh, you know, you'll never manage. Ugandans say, let's do it and see how far we go.
They call it mectizan.
Just to know that there's a generation of children that will not know the suffering that river blindness can cause gives me a smile inside.
This program was made possible by the John Moores family.
I've worked with the river blindness program for over 15 years. River blindness is a terrible disease. I have personally seen so many people suffering from it. It can actually destroy one's life.
Anabe kwa yelo chia, chida wani down wani yelo chingi mara, winjwa. Ani abe wajaba, down wani yelo chingi mara.
In northern Uganda, almost everyone in the village of Angagura is affected by river blindness disease. Each person raising a hand has suffered from it. Men, women, and children.
The disease started in 1995. It has affected his eyes. He cannot see. He cannot do the normal work he has been doing before. There's serious itching all over the body.
River blindness is the common name for human onchocerciasis, a disease caused by small parasitic worms, Onchocerca volvulus. The worms migrate under the skin, causing a disfiguring condition people here call leopard skin, accompanied by severe, intense itching.
It's difficult to describe this level of itching because it's really reputedly has driven people to commit suicide. you can itch, and itch to the point that you're tending to get hold of bits of metal to scratch yourself, and gouge your body, and you become irrational. And if you've got it, there is a social stigma to it, so it's very damaging, especially for, say, a young woman. If she develops these signs early in life, she's not really married.
She said it started when they were in the field digging. The flies have been biting them several times. He started seeing some small worm moving in the eyes. Then after the worm disappeared, she cannot see.
And how has her husband reacted to this?
The husband has refused her because she's blind. She's alone now.
The disease itself is a really insidious disease because of all the socioeconomic impacts that it has. Basically disabling people right when they should be entering the most productive periods of their lives.
How has he been affected by river blindness?
He said, when you are bitten by the flies, you find rashes on your body. Then eventually you find the worm moving in your eyes, moving from down upward. He's now using only one eye. It affects him when he's in the class. When the teacher writes on the blackboard, he cannot see the writing.
What will he do when he finishes school?
That he doesn't know because his eye is becoming blind. He can't predict. He may be blind and he could not continue with the study.
This is another one. This is a nodule.
Fibrous nodules under the skin, anywhere on the body, are another sign of the disease. The worms that cause river blindness are transmitted to humans by the bites of tiny but aggressive black flies that breed in fast-flowing streams and rivers. That's how the disease got its name. Nothing but these flies can transmit the disease from one human to another. When the fly bites to take a blood meal, it sucks in microfilaria, the pre-larval worms that infest the skin of the host. Inside the fly, the microfilaria develop into larval stages that move to the fly's mouth. When the fly bites for another blood meal, it passes the larva into the blood of the next human host. The fly's role in the life cycle of the parasite is now complete. Inside the human host, the larvae migrate to the tissue below the skin, developing into mature worms during the next 6 to 12 months. Males and females form nodules where they mate and produce their young. The female can grow to more than a foot in length, living for as long as 14 years, giving birth to millions of microscopic microfilariae that migrate to all parts of the body, especially the skin and eyes. These tiny worms can survive for up to 2 years inside the human host, unless they're sucked up by a biting black fly, and the worm cycle starts again, spreading the disease. The adult worms remain in the nodules with limited access to the host's immune system, but the microfilariae cause intense inflammatory responses, especially when they die. Rashes, itching, swelling, loss of weight, and weakness become more severe with repeated infections. If the worms migrate to the eyes, they can cause severe lesions, impaired vision, and eventually total blindness.
This Nyamwamba River is a perfect place for black fly breeding.
You see rapidly flowing water over rocks. You see bubbling, which indicates that the water is very well oxygenated. And you see little bits of reeds and green areas where the black flies also like to lay their eggs. So this is, when you look here, you automatically say, river blindness, because this is a perfect breeding site for a black fly. Moses Katabaro and I work for the Carter Center. Moses is an epidemiologist, and both of us are focused on trying to stop river blindness.
Uganda is my country. I was born there. I started off as an agricultural parasitologist. I knew that river blindness was a serious problem, and when the opportunity came to join the fight against this disease, I jumped on it in order to help my people.
In Uganda, we're providing resources and technical assistance to the Ministry of Health.
These are all mature eggs.
We go to the field to see firsthand the problems and to see how the Carter Center can do better in helping the Ministry of Health reach their goal of eliminating river blindness.
Every year we treat about 10 million people for river blindness.
You know, the Carter Center started this work in West Africa. Having a very wide experience, they came here.
Oh, hello.
President Carter has given river blindness a high priority.
130, 1, 2. Yeah.
He's very, very interested in providing funding.
Very good.
And in the health education that's provided to people so they understand why they're being treated.
The little black flies, are they more ubiquitous at night or not? How do you know?
They're day biters.
She gets three. Good morning. Good morning.
I'm a fly catcher. They like these parts.
Can you feel it?
Yeah, it's painful. It bites, then after some time stops, I think sucks blood. And then when that goes low, then it bites again so it can get more. That's how I'm feeling it. Now imagine if you have 1,000 feasting on you. Wow.
People who live near fly breeding areas are most affected by the disease. In places like this, black flies can bite a person hundreds of times a day. Tormented by flies and the disease, villagers abandon their homes and move elsewhere, depopulating fertile farmlands.
That people like to think about diseases in terms of their severity as to whether you die or not. And if you have a condition that doesn't cause that, it tends to be neglected. So we really have to get beyond the idea of, oh, it's just a skin disease. I want everyone to think about how they would feel if their body was burning from 1,000 mosquito bites, day and night. A lot of people would be ready to jump out of the window if they were living a life like that.
He said the disease has affected his life. He has serious itching. He has no energy to do other work. He's always down and pain all over the body. He said normally go to uproot the ginat with the mother. They normally stay in the field from morning until 3 in the evening. So he's beaten all the time. He has itching throughout and has affected his life all the time. Even if the children are playing, he's always crushing himself.
Scientists learned almost a century ago that black flies of the genus Simulium are the vectors that carry river blindness. Millions of people were infected, and hundreds of thousands were blinded by it. The disease was endemic across a wide belt of Africa and in a few pockets in Yemen and in Central and South America. Most affected were the savanna lands of West Africa, especially in the Volta River Basin.
As there was no medicine available to kill the worms that were in the human body, the only way to control river blindness was to go after the black fly through using chemicals put into rivers where the black flies bred.
Spraying breeding areas with insecticides was one solution. Flies were eliminated in some areas, but it was almost impossible to kill all the black flies that could travel hundreds of miles over a vast landscape, often carried by the wind. If flies were eliminated in any location, they could always return. And there were serious concerns about the environmental hazards of using insecticides like DDT. And then, in the 1970s, there was a breakthrough.
Soil is critical in growing good crops, but to a Merck scientist, it is also the source of fascinating organisms.
In the soil, there are these millions of microorganisms which make things that man cannot think of. It's just beyond our chemical knowledge.
Working for the Animal Health Division of the drug maker Merck, researcher William Campbell discovered that the veterinary medicine called ivermectin, extracted from soil samples, was highly effective against animal parasites that were closely related to Onchocerciasis volvulus.
We realized that we had a fantastically potent drug for use in animal health, potentially extremely useful in sheep and cattle and horses and dogs.
Researchers at Merck believed ivermectin might also be useful against river blindness, but there were reasons to be cautious. In the past, other drugs had been used against the disease with serious side effects.
And so there was that thing in the back of all of our minds that maybe any drug that killed the larvae in the skin would make things worse.
But extensive clinical studies showed that ivermectin safely and quickly killed microfilariae in humans. Skin samples proved it, and side effects were minimal.
Over 1,000 patients came into the program, and the amazing thing was that we gave the tablet, then we sampled the skin snips in a month, and 6 months, and 12 months, and those suckers were gone. I mean, once they were killed, they were killed. They didn't come back till at the end, in the 12th month, after that single pill, they started to reappear. And so by the end of our program, we knew we had a drug that was safe and was very effective.
Ivermectin promised a dramatic change in the fight against river blindness. Suddenly, there was a way to eliminate the source of the disease, a way to prevent black flies from infecting themselves when biting. If there are no worms to infect the fly, it cannot transmit worms to anyone else, and transmission is halted. Ivermectin also stops the itching and the progression of eye disease, although much of the damage to the skin and vision cannot be reversed. Ivermectin was a revolutionary drug. But as Merck's executives realized, the only market for it was in poor developing nations. They made an unprecedented decision to donate the drug to any country that needed it, for as long as needed.
There was no way that we could step away from that decision, as I saw it. And here we had a drug that would prevent blindness in literally millions and millions of people.
It was a decision that would cost Merck a great deal of money. Donating hundreds of millions of ivermectin tablets under its trade name, Mectizan.
They launched their donation program called the Mectizan Donation Program in 1987. So they've really stuck with this for over 25 years. More than 1 billion doses have been provided. The challenge in the very beginning from the donation was, okay, well, here is this medicine. How do we get it to the end of the road? How do we get it to the people who need it the most, who are typically people residing in remote rural communities with little access, little money, poor infrastructure, no voice?
In Africa, 31 countries are working together to distribute Mectizan in the African Program for Onchocerciasis Control. They've made solid progress in removing the disease from vast areas of fertile lands, empowering local communities to manage their own control programs with Mectizan.
The approach to doing this is something that we call community-directed treatment. The concept is that this medicine is so safe, it doesn't need refrigeration, it doesn't need needles, it doesn't need highly trained people. The medicine can be delivered by community volunteers to their friends, their neighbors, their family, in a way that they choose, at a time that they choose, in an organization that they develop to provide the medicine and develop the records needed to show how well they did in treatment coverage. And this process, community-directed treatment with ivermectin, is the approach to controlling river blindness being used throughout Africa.
It's a process that transfers, distributes, and monitors ivermectin treatment for over 100 million people each year in more than 120,000 communities, effectively controlling river blindness as a public health problem in wide areas of rural Africa where it has always caused misery. But in northern Uganda, conditions are far different.
Here in the north, river blindness situation is terrible. It's the worst in the whole country. These people have suffered so much from the disease, especially during the period of insurgency for over 20 years.
Northern Uganda had been tormented by a brutal civil war since the early 1980s. The conflict destroyed schools and health clinics, claiming thousands of innocent civilian lives and driving hundreds of thousands into refugee camps. For many who lived here, even basic health services were unavailable, and many diseases, including river blindness, spread beyond control.
On my job, I spend most of the time in the field, looking for fly breeding sites, catching them, and dissecting them to establish whether they harbor the parasites.
If the flies breed here, they go upland and they attack people there.
I'm only a part of the bigger national team involved in the controlling the black flies. Flies can go to Sudan, flies can move anywhere. So the most important thing is to protect the communities against the disease. Next. And we are involved in the treatment of patients suffering from the disease.
Above 141, so she will take 3 tablets. She's above. All the time, the flies come from the river and bite them from here.
Oh, from the other Agago River.
Yes. That most of the community here are blind because of river blindness.
And even the skin is not smooth enough. It's developing some dermatitis.
Adult worm, actually, the female and male worm, they meet here and they produce microfilaria.
Oh,
this is serious.
This is leopard skin.
Leopard skin. This is typical. The flies normally bite seriously in the morning and in the evening, and the flight is too much.
It is terrible because that's the time they go again to their gardens to dig, which means they become unproductive because of those flies.
These were the mark which was left by the flies bitten last time. So when you see these are the mark, and this was bitten yesterday when they went to fetch water.
Which means a baby like this one could be having onchocerciasis.
Exactly. This boy has stopped studying because he cannot see the eyes.
Oh,
he has
the
been
eyes
bitten by
affected.
the filaria worms. He can't see, he can't go to school. He has to stay at home. This one is 13 years old.
Oh, sorry.
But this one, they have been bitten by the fly when they were still young, when they were children.
Among children with symptoms of river blindness in these northern villages, many also suffer from something else, a condition similar to epilepsy, affecting the brain and nervous system. People here believe this condition, which they call nodding disease, is somehow related to river blindness. But what seems obvious to those in these villages is not supported by definitive scientific proof.
It's very controversial. The question is, which came first, the nodding disease or river blindness?
Actually, when you see the eyes,
some people say that nodding disease came first, and if you get nodding disease, then you're more likely to get bitten by the black fly, and so you're more likely to get river blindness. Or others say that first you get river blindness, and somehow river blindness itself causes nodding to occur.
In Central and South America, the Onchocerciasis elimination program has operated in all 6 affected countries.
Those 6 countries, Mexico, Guatemala, Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, decided together with the Pan American Health Organization, the Carter Center, and other partners would work toward the goal where river blindness could be completely eliminated by the year 2015.
To find out if someone is infected with river blindness, health workers examine a small skin snip. If the person is infected, tiny microfilarial worms can clearly be seen emerging from the skin. Because the disease is less widespread here than in Africa, the strategy has been to treat at least 85% of the population in affected areas with Mectizan twice a year. A strategy shown to eliminate the parasite within 7 years. In some areas, health workers surgically remove nodules that harbor the adult worms.
When you remove the nodule, you're curing the patient, assuming the patient only has a single nodule. The problem you get into is that many of the nodules are not recognizable. They're too far beneath the skin to find. That means that even if you removed all the nodules by this surgery that you could find, there will probably be 1 or 2 that you've missed, so that the risk for having skin disease or eye disease from river blindness persists. In Guatemala and Mexico, with the history since the 1930s of doing nodulectomy, people are very used to this happening. They actually want their nodules removed. And secondarily, you have Ministry of Health personnel who are highly trained in doing these surgical procedures.
Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, and Ecuador have halted transmission of river blindness, and the goal now is elimination of the parasite in the entire Americas region by the year 2019. In Africa, some of the earliest attempts to eliminate river blindness were made in Uganda, including a highly successful campaign that began in the 1950s, spraying DDT to eliminate black flies along the Nile River near Lake Victoria. The flies and the disease disappeared and have never returned. Elsewhere in Uganda, the control of river blindness is based on community-directed treatment with ivermectin. More than 70% of Ugandans in affected areas have received an annual dose of ivermectin for at least 10 years, and there has been a major reduction in the prevalence of skin rashes, nodules, and skin microfilaria carriers.
The Ugandan program from the beginning has been very strong, very good at distributing the medicine ivermectin.
But there's a big difference now between Uganda's program and those in the rest of Africa. Like in the Americas, Uganda's goal is to completely eliminate the parasite that causes it.
The black fly, they call it here umbwa, meaning dog. It bites like a dog.
To bring these people back out of their villages and also see new ones come in, and they are all excited about getting treatment. They are learning and becoming committed to community-directed treatment. They don't complain, and they talk about it with a sense of humor. It's very satisfying. Outsiders sometimes tell us that we are taking on too much, and we come back and say, no, it's not too much. Ugandans are not afraid of failure. Ugandans say, let's do it and see how far we go.
Do they know the word mectizan? Throughout Africa, the attempt really now is to control the disease, to prevent blindness, to prevent skin disease, but accept certain low levels of the parasite will remain and continue to be transmitted. The parasite would still be in the human population, risking a return in the future of the disease. In Uganda, the idea is to completely get rid of the parasite and therefore, once and for all, be through with the problem.
Ivermectin kills the microfilariae and it reduces their production. But it does not kill the adults, which continue to live in the host, inside the nodules, capable of producing microfilaria again if treatment with ivermectin is disrupted. The adults can continue to do this for years.
Ivermectin is being given throughout Africa in programs that are very, very successful. The question is, how long do we have to continue doing that? The current mathematical models suggest that when you're giving ivermectin once per year, you'll have to give the medicine indefinitely. In that case, you're looking at a program that has to be sustained forever. Well, that brings up the question, will we have the funding to keep doing this forever? And will ivermectin be effective forever? Or will we reach a point where resistance could develop after many, many years of using this medicine? Would we be looking at a situation where river blindness has come back with a vengeance to its levels that it was at when we first started the program in the 1990s?
and we have red. Here in green is where transmission has been interrupted.
Uganda's government says if it has the necessary financial resources and continuing supplies of free ivermectin supplied by Merck, elimination of river blindness in Uganda is feasible by combining more intensive treatment with ivermectin twice a year, like in the Americas, with a vector control program to eliminate the black fly.
There are major challenges, but I think we are now beginning to see evidence that indeed onchocerciasis can be eliminated in Uganda.
The Carter Center supports Uganda's aggressive strategy to eliminate river blindness throughout the country by 2020. Uganda has a unique opportunity to do this.
The Carter Center likes to do things that are different and difficult, and we were very attracted to the vision of the Ugandans in saying, let's take this one step further. Let's try to use what we have available now to completely and rapidly eliminate river blindness.
The first goal in eliminating the disease is to break its transmission, zone by zone.
Breaking transmission means that the black fly is no longer putting the parasite that causes river blindness into people. When that stops, then the transmission cycle has been broken. And you reach a point where you can stop your interventions, meaning you can stop delivering ivermectin, you can stop doing vector control. So there are two types of larvae there. One is the one we're looking for.
This one.
These two. I don't know if you can see them, but there are a couple of light brown ones there. And then there's a big black one. It's the light brown ones that are the black fly larvae.
In most parts of Africa where river blindness is found, in the open savannas, the fly that transmits the disease lays its eggs in running water, the larvae attaching to floating vegetation or rocks. Emerging from underwater as flying adults, they can range far from breeding sites in search of blood meals. Strong savanna winds can carry them hundreds of miles. Controlling an insect vector like that on a large scale seems nearly impossible. A major reason why river blindness programs in most parts of Africa now rely mainly on treatment with ivermectin to control the itching and blindness from the disease. But in Uganda, most river blindness is transmitted by a different species of fly, and that opens an opportunity.
Uganda is unique in that it has a kind of black fly vector that we call Simulium nevi. And Simulium nevi has a fragile life cycle, much more fragile than other vectors in other parts of Africa. I'll mark this as the Congo border.
This is the female. Most likely, I'm seeing this place as the best place for trapping. Being carnivores, the crops, we are going to get meat, make sure that it's tight. When it is tight like this, then push the meat inside the trap. So after putting it in the water, we shall wait for 1 hour. Then after 1 hour, we get out the trap to see what has been caught.
In Uganda, controlling black flies is still an important part of the river blindness program, and highly experienced vector control teams are active in stopping the flies from breeding.
This fly is infected.
They can do this because these flies, Simulium nevi, depend on freshwater crabs to complete their life cycle.
Oh, it is full. It is full. So when we are looking for the first stages of the larvae, they are always found in the joints in the joints here.
Wow.
Yeah. Then, as they mature, they are found around the body here. And they always move from one place to another. This is a larva. 1, 2, 3, 4. This was a pupa, because when I pressed it, I crushed it, unfortunately. So 5, 6, 7. You can see the larvae here. You can see them. You can see it here.
The black fly lays its eggs in water, the eggs hatch, and the little wormy things we call larvae must swim around and find a crab. If they don't find a crab, they'll die. If they find a crab, they can get on that crab, encyst, form pupae, and from the pupae emerge the adult black fly, which is responsible for the transmission of river blindness. No crab, no black fly. No black fly, no river blindness. So can you pronounce the genus and species of this crab?
They belong to Potomonas arosisbodi.
Alosis bodi.
Yes.
The little crab with the long name.
This is a female. This is a female, you checked.
The fly's essential relationship with crabs allows a simple method for locating fly breeding sites, catching crabs and examining them for the larvae or pupae of developing flies.
After trapping these crabs, we have found out actually the crabs are heavily infested with the early stages of the Sumulia munivi.
When breeding sites are found, the vector control teams apply doses of an environmentally safe larvicide in the stream or river.
So you'll tie the rope from here,
We tie a rope from here.
and you'll go across to the other side. This looks like it's going to be a little deeper than your boots. I think you're going to get your feet wet. We are measuring flow rates to be able to determine the best way to dose an environmentally friendly larvicide called abate or timophos to kill the aquatic stages, the water stages of the black fly. Negative, positive. You can just see the logistical challenges just glancing upstream here and seeing that 3 kilometers upstream, you're going to have to do exactly what's taking place here. And the same 3 kilometers downstream from here. So you can imagine the kind of time and dedication it takes to do that. It's very tough work.
3, 2, 8. So we got the next
point.
It is 2.7. So now velocity is at 40%.
At each point.
Yeah, at 40%.
Is that the rain? Rain. Wouldn't be a rainforest if it didn't rain. So now they're going to apply in a pump fashion the abate and a spray in the calculations that we just did to give the correct dosage.
The larvicide is donated to the river blindness program by the chemical company BASF.
Treatments on this river began about a year ago. First, what we did was we came and we tested the crabs to see if they were infected, and indeed they were. Over 90% of the crabs which we collected here had the larval or pupal stages of the black fly, so it was a hot zone.
Negative.
We began dosing monthly and then checking the crabs also monthly. We started this program, 90% of them had something on them.
Over 90%.
Yes. And we found that now, in the last 3 months, we have not found a single infected crab.
The female 4.0 is clean. There's no infestation.
It's clean.
Yeah. 4.5 is clean. 3.7 is clean.
So far so good. We have found no infected crabs, which indicate that the abate is doing what it's supposed to do. It's not hurting the crabs, but it is stopping the black fly. This is what we hope to achieve in all of the habitats where it is technically feasible to do this.
In these thickly forested habitats, the nevi species is easier to control. Because the flight range of this black fly is limited, it will stay within a few miles of its breeding area, inside the dark, shaded forests, near rivers or streams. In Uganda, there are 18 zones where river blindness has been found. Each of them, called a focus or hot zone, is distinct and isolated. The nevi blackflies do not move from one zone to another, so eliminating river blindness here becomes a series of separate battles, one zone at a time.
Uganda is not claiming that we are going to eliminate onchocerciasis in the next 2 or 3 years. But Uganda is saying that when you are eating food, you don't push your fingers or fork all over the place. You start from one side of the plate, remove it piece by piece until the meal is finished. The same thing with onchocerciasis. You begin with the easiest zones, finish those, reduce the problem, and the most difficult zones become easy as you can get all your skills and tools at your disposal for dealing with the remaining zones.
This is a clump of nodules. You can start taking a dose of ivermectin.
And as a physician makes a diagnosis of a patient and then prescribes the medicine that's necessary, the epidemiologist who's examining these different hot zones in Uganda must also write a prescription for what is needed.
This drug works very well.
And that prescription involves how often the ivermectin needs to be provided, as well as the approach to controlling the blackfly vector in those hot zones.
After years of treatment with ivermectin and dosing of streams and rivers to fight the flies, Uganda has already stopped transmission of river blindness in some hot zones.
The chairman said that now Flaria has been wiped out in your district. You have been taking the drug.
Six zones have completely interrupted river blindness transmission, and treatment there has stopped. And there are 3 more zones where we think transmission has been interrupted.
In those zones, skin snips show few people living there now carry the microfilariae of the parasites, and treatments have stopped for more than 1 million Ugandans who were once at risk of infection.
There are 3 more zones where interruption is in sight. Others are still behind because they are difficult or more information is required. What Uganda has done is to keep all tools on the table so that whenever they are needed, they can be applied.
That means extensive baseline surveys to map all fly breeding sites, routine trapping of flies and crabs, fly dissection and dosing of larvicide, and building local support and delivery systems for semi-annual treatments. With this strategy, Ugandans are confident they can build on progress they've already made, and within a few years, stop transmission of river blindness in the zones where the disease is still found.
You can't clear river blindness in 1 day or in 1 week or in 1 year.
Even in the north, with more than 500,000 people at risk in villages like Angagura, Pader, and Kitgum.
The challenges in the transmission zones, the hot zones of the north, are many. First, this area has only recently been pacified. It was an area of insecurity. Now people have come back to their villages, and the challenges are to set up community-directed treatment with ivermectin and to determine exactly what the role of vector control should be in the north. It's the last big challenge.
But river blindness has taken a terrible toll on these people, and the campaign against the disease here has just begun.
So he's actually totally blind. We have seen a number of both adults and children who are really infected with onchocerciasis. The number is overwhelming. Around here we have about 100 people, both children and adults. And yet, this is just a sample of people from the village around the health center here. So it is a clear indication, therefore, that there is a disaster in this place. A disaster due to onchocerciasis. Very good girl.
As medical services return to these villages, treatment for river blindness includes nodulectomies for some.
And this is the worm.
In those areas, you have to pull out all stops, particularly if you want to achieve the Ministry of Health goal of eliminating river blindness by the year 2020. You don't have the luxury of carrying on a program for 15 or 20 years.
In these northern savannas bordering South Sudan, the disease is carried by the species of fly that does not depend on crabs to develop.
This vector can fly a lot farther than Simulium nevi, which means that the extent of the hot zone can be much broader. And it's a cross-border issue involving two governments and two ministries of health and Ministry of Health teams.
The north is the largest and most difficult zone in the country. But after we have interrupted transmission in all the other zones, we can focus all of our resources and skills on the north. And finishing the job there will be much easier.
After 26 years, Merck still supports the Mectizan donation program. The company has provided more than 1 billion treatments, now more than 100 million each year.
The river blindness program, be it in Africa or in the Americas, has been a tremendous success. I think it's one of the great success stories in public health. This is not a handout. It's the people in the villages who've accomplished this difficult job. We've seen the numbers of people infected drop by over 90%, even in the most difficult areas. And that means fewer people have visual loss, and certainly fewer people are becoming blind. Skin disease has improved. It's really remarkable.
The River Blindness Campaign has set an example for efforts to control and eliminate other neglected tropical diseases. Pharmaceutical companies are now donating drugs to treat blinding trachoma, schistosomiasis, intestinal parasites in children, and lymphatic filariasis. In Uganda, in the zones where transmission has been interrupted, the stage is now set for the final goal: eliminating the disease.
To say that transmission is eliminated, one must first stop the interventions, stop the vector control, stop the ivermectin distribution, and monitor closely for a period of 3 years. If transmission does not pick up again, then we can say that transmission has been eliminated. That's our goal.
Elimination of river blindness in Uganda is going to happen, and very soon. And I can tell you, there's going to be a celebration.
Just to know that there's a generation of children that will not know the suffering that river blindness can cause, and that I was a part of the effort, the active effort to spare them of that, gives me a smile inside.
River blindness is retreating. And it's now possible to foresee a time when it will not only be controlled, but actually eliminated in even the most remote regions of Africa. Uganda is proving that possibility.
Eliminating river blindness may not be easy in Uganda, but now I think it can be done.
This program was made possible by the John Moores family.